At the top of one of the most opulent towers in Manhattan, Brad Miller stood, gazing at the city that never sleeps through the vast windows of his penthouse. The twinkling rooftops and flashing lights seemed like mere toys to this 25-year-old man, whose fortune could buy anything. But despite his wealth, something was missing in his life. Brad, with his perfectly combed blonde hair and deep blue eyes, had a breathtaking appearance, but a melancholic expression hung on his handsome face. But before the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and let us know in the comments what you thought of the video. Behind that look were the scars of a heart broken by romantic disappointments. In an elegant office within the same penthouse, Brad sat in front of a large solid wood desk, surrounded by a cutting silence. The atmosphere was tense, echoing Brad's internal feelings. His gaze fixed on a framed photograph, he and the woman who claimed to be his fiancée, Katerina. Katerina was a stunning woman, but to Brad, her clear blue eyes seemed increasingly empty. Did she truly love him, or was she just interested in his money? Brad knew he needed to find out, so he made a decision that would change everything. "Katerina, we need to talk," he said later that night, his tone serious, instilling a sense of unease. Katerina raised an eyebrow, but replied with a casual smile. "Of course, dear. What's wrong?" "I lost everything," he declared, keeping a calm expression. "The investments, they failed. We have nothing left." Katerina's smile vanished. She seemed shocked, and couldn't hide the repulsion she felt. "What do you mean we have nothing left, Brad?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I mean all my money is gone, Katerina." "Everything," he reiterated, closely observing her reactions. Instead of compassion or support, what Brad received was anger and accusations. Katerina blamed him for being irresponsible, for destroying their future together. The love she claimed to feel seemed to have evaporated, replaced by bitter disgust. Brad felt hurt, but also relieved. Now he knew the truth. As silence filled the room after Katerina's stormy exit, Brad felt alone, more than ever. However, at the same time, he felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He knew it was time to seek something more, something real. And it didn't take long for fate to introduce him to a person who would change his life forever. The dawn, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, found Brad on the rooftop of the building, amidst the silence of the waking city. He was still absorbing the events of the previous night, the pain was still fresh, but a strange feeling of hope began to arise in his chest. Lost in thought, Brad didn't notice the presence of another person on the rooftop until he heard her soft, melodious voice. "Beautiful sunrise, don't you think?" Brad turned around, surprised. Before him stood a young woman with long black hair and honey-colored eyes, who stared at him with a serene smile on her face. "Oh, yes, it's beautiful," Brad managed to reply, catching himself enchanted by the stranger. She was stunning, but in a completely different way than Katerina. Her eyes reflected a depth and empathy Brad had never seen before. There was something about her that drew Brad in an unexplainable way. "Sorry, I didn't introduce myself," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Alice." "Alice," Brad repeated, feeling a smile forming on his face as he greeted her. "I'm Brad." And thus, a new phase in Brad's life began. He and Alice started to spend more and more time together. They went to cafes, strolled through Central Park, watched movies, and went to plays. And most importantly, they talked. They talked about their dreams, fears, ambitions, and disappointments. Alice listened with empathy and never judged. Before long, Brad realized he was falling in love. One afternoon, as they were walking side by side through Riverside Park, Brad gathered the courage to confess his feelings. "Alice," he began, I think I'm in love with you." Alice stopped and looked at him in surprise. Brad held his breath, waiting for her response. After what felt like an eternity, she smiled and held Brad's hand. "I'm in love with you too, Brad." At that moment, despite all his wounds and disappointments, Brad felt everything would make sense. He had found someone who loved him, not for his fortune or looks, but for who he was. And for the first time in a long time, Brad felt genuinely happy. The clock struck 7 in the evening, and the seductive aroma of French cuisine wafted through the elegant Le Bernardin restaurant, where Brad and Alice were celebrating their 3-month anniversary. Brad lovingly looked at Alice, who looked stunning in a red dress. "Alice," Brad began, taking her hand. "These past 3 months with you have been the best of my life. You brought light into my darkness, joy into my sadness." Alice softly smiled, her eyes shining. "Brad, I..." Brad stood up from his chair, interrupting her. He knelt before her, holding a small black box. The entire restaurant came to a halt. The waiters suspended service, the customers stopped eating, everyone was waiting. "Alice," Brad spoke again, his tone now more serious. "Will you marry me?" Alice's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, unable to speak. Brad slid the diamond ring onto her finger before rising and embracing her warmly. The entire room erupted into applause. Chapter 4: The Enigma. Following the proposal, life seemed like a fairy tale for Brad and Alice. However, fate seemed to have other plans. A week before the wedding, a mysterious letter arrived at Brad's mansion. The handwriting was elegant, but the message was enigmatic. "To see a person's true face, take away all they have." Brad read the message over and over, trying to decipher it. What did it mean? And who would have motives to send such a message? The answer only came after a series of unfortunate events. First, Brad's company suffered massive losses. Then, his bank account was inexplicably emptied. In a matter of days, Brad found himself with nothing. And then, Alice's true face was revealed. Brad, now devoid of his riches, saw a new face of Alice, a face he never expected to see. She became distant, cold, and calculating. Alice, the woman he thought he loved, was more interested in his money than in him. "Tell me this isn't true, Alice," Brad implored, unable to believe his own reality. "Tell me that you love me, not my money." Alice looked at him coldly, her eyes empty of love. "Brad, you were a good catch, while it lasted. But without your money, what are you to me?" Brad felt his heart shatter. He was alone again, lonelier than ever. Desperate and helpless, Brad found refuge in the diner across town, where he met Melanie, the kind and loving waitress who worked there. Melanie was different from any other woman Brad had met. She was simple, genuine, and had a heart of gold. The two started to spend more time together, and Brad found himself falling in love again. He was drawn to Melanie not for her looks or status, but for her kindness and character. Melanie knew of Brad's financial situation, and still, she did not distance herself from him. She supported him, cared for him, and gave him hope. And Brad realized that true love was not about money or wealth, but about mutual understanding and support. "Melanie, will you marry me?" Brad asked, looking deeply into Melanie's eyes. This time, he had no diamond ring or fancy restaurant. He only had his pure and sincere love. Melanie, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "Yes, Brad. I will." Despite the difficulties, Brad and Melanie got married. They did not have a grand party or a lavish wedding banquet, but they had each other. And for them, that was enough. Brad learned a valuable lesson. He realized that love was not about money or riches, but about character and kindness. And with Melanie by his side, Brad felt richer than ever. The story of Brad Miller is a story of overcoming. He lost everything, but found something more valuable: true love. And in the end, that is what really matters. Did you like this story? Comment below what you think and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.